Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Yes, that song is a tribute to the Supremes. We need you to stop. Stop in the name of something, if not love. Stop. Oh, my goodness. The Supremes went ahead and just suspended rule of law entirely. They see clearly. You know why they did it, by the way. These morons who created that 1,700-page document failed to put a little clause that's at the end of virtually every law written for generations that says if any part of this law is found unconstitutional, the rest would be kept intact. And they didn't include that one paragraph, which means at some point, if something actually does fail, the entire law itself will implode. And that just shows you how in the bat these guys are. The decision wasn't even close. I continue to think that Justice Roberts has incredibly scandalous pictures of him being held by someone in the Obama administration that's leading to him being blackmailed. But even without him, the decision would have been a 5-4 decision. It wasn't really even close when you get down to it. You know, and Sigmund Kramer, who's always kind of a jerk and hard to be around anyway, he's been miserable today. And so, you know, and here it is 24 hours later, and you're still belly aching.
Well, I mean, I'm done. Honestly, I'm just, I have no more to give. I have no more emotion. I have no more effort. None of it matters to me. I mean, I could be the biggest political wonk, and it's not going to matter because I could have had a million reasons not to, vote for the ACA. I could have had a million reasons that it was going to be horrible for the country. It was going to negatively impact the lives of every American, and it wouldn't have mattered. Even if I was right about everything, it wouldn't have mattered because time and again, this Supreme Court is writing law that's not there. It was not ever in the law that it was a tax. It was never talked about during the entire process, and until the Solicitor General for the administration argued it in front of the Supreme Court, and then all of a sudden, it's a tax.
Yeah, well, it's
and now this time around, the federal exchanges, the state exchanges, it's all the same. Yeah. What does it matter?
It's all the same.
So I say, what does it matter? I have nothing more to give. I'm so incredibly depressed at where our country's going. But you pointed out, it's not the first time that the Supreme Court of the United States has overstepped its bounds, constitutionally speaking.
Yeah, let's start at 1803 with Marbury versus Madison, and at that point, Madison began to say, this whole Supreme Court thing isn't going to work out very good. The Constitution itself is going to become irrelevant, and they're going to just come. And by the way, what's funny about Marbury versus Madison, and Madison said all that stuff that he was worried about the future of the Constitution, and Jefferson said it's time to reassess the Constitution. He was ready to dump it. He wanted to have the Constitution reconsidered every generation, every 20 years after Marbury versus Madison. And
then it would have been a living, breathing document, which is what they consider it anyway.
Right. And at least it would have been done legitimately, and it would have been done with law and not through the interpretation of an oligarchy called the Supreme Court.
Unaccountable, unelected, they can be there for life, and it's if it was not obvious to you folks before how detrimental to liberty and rule of law the actual Supreme Court is, I hope it is now. Probably not, because you're probably not paying attention.
What's funny about Marbury versus Madison is that Madison won. He didn't like the way he won. What the court did is it gave power that the court really didn't have. It allowed itself to interpret the law rather than what Madison thought the law had already clearly stated, that in terms of Congress's limitations. They said Congress doesn't have those limitations, but we'll put those limitations on Congress, is essentially what Marbury versus Madison said. And he was like, what? All of a sudden they were now an oligarchy of its own, taking on the rule of law itself. And Madison not so much, but at that point, Jefferson really began to question what was going to happen with this Constitution.
Well, at this point, the ACA is now. I don't see there's any way that it's going to be repealed in Congress. I mean, they certainly don't have the political backbone to do that. And so we're toast. I mean, it's just going to be millions and billions of words of regulations, and it's going to affect every American's life. And you think, you small-minded little twerps, you think that because you're getting health care insurance for cheaper than you had paid before, that it's a good thing. You think that that because you know somebody who's been positively affected, that it's a good thing. But I tell you, your liberty's been stripped away. You don't have a choice anymore. Except, Kevin, we all know that there will be exceptions made. It's total cronyism. It's whoever they deem at the time, whatever political party deems, politically feasible and expedient to carve outs and cutouts. It's just basically going to be the IRS tax code for healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we all know how that's been blown totally out of proportion for generations now, and how it affects everybody, and how the IRS, basically is the Gestapo, how they can have those kind of tactics on the American people. And now it's going to be applied to life and death situations.
Marco Rubio tweeting that, in fact, we need to continue to fight for the repeal of Obamacare. The question is,
blah.
The question is if the Republicans maintain a majority in both houses, if Republicans win the White House with a Republican president who wants it to go away, would they do it?
No.
Why?
Because they're only interested in their own elections, their own re-elections. And there are millions of people, right or wrong, who think that that Obamacare is helping. So, no. They wouldn't do it. That would take principle. That would take a principled stand where they say, you know what, I'm going to fall on this sword, okay? I'm going to do what's right, even if it costs me my political career. We don't have politicians like that.
Business Insider reports in its fiery dissent, Scalia lashed out at Chief Justice John Roberts for his key vote to save a provision of the Affordable Care Act that allowed the federal government to provide health care subsidies to Americans in 34 states that did not set up their own health care exchanges. We should start calling this law SCOTUS care.
Right. That's right.
This is the second time that Roberts has played a major role upholding Obama's health care law. In a high-profile constitutional challenge in 2012, Robert was the crucial vote that helped save the majority of the Affordable Care Act, which is why I continue to say, and this is just, an accusation. I've got no evidence, but if you have any, please email it to me. What in the world does Barack Obama have on Justice Roberts? Because this totally defies Roberts' judicial history. This kind of decision defies it.
Well, and isn't it great that he's got a lifetime appointment so he can continue to defy his history?
Words,
time and again.
Words no longer have meaning if an exchange that is not established by a state is established by the state, is right. What Scalia said.
That's right.
It is hard to come up with
big state, little state. I'm sure he.
It is, yeah. It is hard to come up with ooh, that's good. I'm going to write an article about that. It is hard to come up with a clearer way to limit tax credits to state exchanges than to use the words established by the state, Scalia said.
Yeah.
This is so unusual. Normal rules of interpretation seem always to yield to the overriding principle of the present court. The Affordable Care Act must be saved, Scalia said. That apparently is what, his colleague Roberts believes, or regardless of the fact that there's nothing redeemable about it based on rule of law.
Well, here's the thing, okay? I just had a little mini conversation with my brother-in-law who said, well, it may have been different had the Republicans in Congress come up with a stopgap measure in the case of, this decision going the opposite way and basically striking down the feasibility of the Affordable Care Act. It is not up to the Supreme Court, in my opinion, to care whether or not there is political feasibility to the decision-making process.
No, it's not at all.
It is supposed to be what the Constitution, rather than whether or not the law would work, it has to be whether or not the law was constitutional and whether or not it was written in a way that was legal. And if it wasn't, then ramifications be damned. you have to rule against it. And instead, I guarantee you, their thought was there are too many people's lives affected by this who will lose insurance, who will be in a bad position if the ACA just ceases to exist all of a sudden. And so, therefore, I'm voting that it's okay.
This case requires us to decide whether someone who buys insurance on an exchange established by the Secretary gets tax credits. You would think the answer would be obvious. So obvious that there would hardly be a need for the Supreme Court to hear a case about it, Scalia said. Some court watchers also noted that Scalia ended his dissent on an unfriendly note. Scalia, and less or so Thomas are the only guys really with a backbone.
Scalia's getting older, and he's not going to be around a whole lot longer. And so basically,
you're not going to see another one of him.
Bend over, everybody, because from now on, you're going to have a bunch of Kennedys, you're going to have a bunch of Roberts, you're going to have a bunch of Ruth Bader Ginsburgs, and whenever there's a Democrat in power, then you're going to have everything go their way. It won't even be 5-4 anymore.
I think the bumper music today should have been Duran Duran, Come Undone. That would have been a better even description of where you're at.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I'm done.
You're done.
I am. I can't begin to tell you how much I had wrapped up emotionally. You remember in 2012 when they came out with, you and I were sitting here when we found out about it, and we both were sick to our stomachs that Roberts had voted that it was a tax.
2012.
And you and I both felt sick for the rest of the day.
Thanks for the memories.
I've been feeling sick ever since then, whenever the ACA is mentioned. And I just can't continue to do that. And so I'm done. I mean, we are a country that is going to get what it deserves, Kevin, because we don't care, we don't act appropriately, and it's
and
just
I guess,
go downhill.
because I remember I was physically ill in 2012, and I'm kind of like, I guess apparently I've given up myself. I may have done it before you did because I've not been that. I've been feeling disaffected today. Actually,
yeah, I was holding out hope that this decision was going to follow rule of law and to be logical, and it's not.
Yeah, this should have been 6-3, the opposite.
In both of these scenarios, in front of the Supreme Court, the ACA has defied logic, it has defied rational thought, and it has gone straight politics. And if the Supreme Court is straight politics, I'm done. I want no part of it because the Constitution does not matter anymore.
It doesn't matter.
Folks, get plenty of water and hug your kids and just live your lives because everything else.
Get off the grid. Hurry up and get off the grid.
Everything else around you is just going to go on no matter what you have to say or do. It's just going to go on. So you just take care of yourselves.
Speaking of done, so is today's show. And it was been an interesting one. Relatively entertaining until I let Sigmund turn on the mic.
Yep.
And I'm kind of depressed now. But I do want to remind you the show continues 24/7 over at priceofbusiness.com while there. Like it on Facebook. And also follow it on Twitter. Same with our friends at usdatareview.com. Stay tuned for more great programming right here on this station.